Can love be put on trial like a crime? And who would dare act as the judge when the heart has already passed its sentence? In the midst of a city that appears law-abiding yet secretly violates feelings, a thunderous story is about to begin. A story that makes people wonder, smile through tears, and be shocked by decisions never written in any statute book. If you have ever loved in silence or been abandoned without a single clause of defense, brace yourself, because this story will drag you into the most dangerous courtroom in the world, the courtroom called the heart. And before this story continues, listen carefully. Will you side with logic or with emotion? And after reading it, don't forget your voice. Leave a trace through a comment, support it with a like, and keep following this story, because every reaction from you is a judge's gavel that helps determine its ending. No one expected the name Xiao Zhang to be printed on the front page of the city bulletin on a morning soaked with rain and gossip. He was neither a criminal nor a hero. He was merely a legal archives clerk whose life was as neat as the brown folders in the steel cabinets of the courthouse. His life ran straight, dull, and almost flawless until one day another name was accidentally slipped into it. Zhou Lucy, a woman with laughter that refused to obey rules, a smile that could not be regulated by clauses, and the courage to love without reading the terms and conditions. Their meeting happened on a ridiculous day, the day Xiao Zhang tripped on the steps of the law library while carrying a stack of civil law documents, sending all the papers flying like panicked pigeons. In the middle of the chaos, Zhou Lucy appeared, not to help politely like the lead in a classic drama, but to laugh out loud until she nearly sat on the floor, then say that the law shouldn't be taken too seriously, because if it falls, it can get hurt too. That sentence, simple and careless, somehow lodged itself in Xiao Zhang's mind more deeply than the articles he knew by heart. Zhou Lucy was a freelance journalist who often wrote news with sensational headlines, full of questions and surprises, articles that made readers angry, laugh, then secretly nod in agreement. She believed emotion was the most honest truth, while Xiao Zhang believed truth had to be ratified, stamped, and signed. Two worlds that should never have met instead collided with a loud crash, producing sparks they initially called coincidence. Their relationship developed like a strange case with no precedent. They argued about everything, from the definition of love to whether instant noodles could legally be called food under health regulations. Zhou Lucy often teased Xiao Zhang by saying he could sue the sun for rising too early, while Xiao Zhang replied with a straight face that Zhou Lucy could be charged with stealing his heart without written permission. That was where comedy was born, from two equally stubborn people slowly learning to laugh at each other's absurdity. But the city was not kind to love stories that didn't conform to its unwritten rules. There was a law of love that had never been codified, a social law that dictated who was allowed to love whom, when, and how. Xiao Zhang, with his modest background and quiet life, was considered too small for Zhou Lucy's big dreams. Meanwhile, Zhou Lucy, with her reputation for often shaking the city news, was deemed too noisy for the safe life Xiao Zhang's family envisioned. The conflict peaked when one of Zhou Lucy's articles exploded across the city. An article questioning the morality of the legal institution where Xiao Zhang worked. The headline was provocative, full of clickbait, asking whether the law truly protected justice or merely the feelings of those in power. Xiao Zhang's name was never mentioned, but everyone knew, and whispers began to turn into accusations. Their love seemed to be tried in the court of public opinion, dragged in without a defense. Xiao Zhang was trapped between two oaths, his oath to his job and an unwritten oath to his feelings. He tried to remain neutral, but neutrality turned out to be a painful choice in itself. Zhou Lucy felt betrayed, not because Xiao Zhang didn't defend her publicly, but because she had hoped love could be a defense without being asked. Their arguments were full of emotion, tears mixed with bitter laughter, because even in anger they knew each other too well to truly hate. There were absurd moments amid the tragedy, like when Xiao Zhang tried to write a love letter in legal language complete with articles and clauses, only for Zhou Lucy to return it covered in red notes like a strict lecturer, saying that love couldn't be filed as a formal objection. Or when they were accidentally trapped by rain under a bridge, arguing while sharing a leaking umbrella, then laughing as they realized that even nature seemed to be testing their relationship. The climax came during a major ethics hearing, when Xiao Zhang was summoned as a witness in a case triggered by Zhou Lucy's article. In that courtroom, before judges, prosecutors, and spectators, he faced a choice never taught in university. He could speak honestly and destroy his career, or lie for personal safety while sacrificing love. In that moment, he realized that the law of love never offered a safe path, only choices whose risks had to be borne. His speech in the courtroom was a shock. He neither defended the institution nor attacked Zhou Lucy. He spoke about people, about fear, about love that had no protective clauses. His words shook the room, making some angry, some moved, and some laugh bitterly as they felt exposed. Zhou Lucy cried, not solely from sadness, but because she finally heard truth unwrapped from formality. The verdict did not fully favor Xiao Zhang, and their lives changed drastically afterward. Yet amid the ruins of reputation and future plans, they found something more honest. Their love no longer tried to obey unclear laws, but a simple agreement to choose each other every day, even as the world raised its eyebrows. The days after the hearing felt like living in an entirely new city, the same buildings, the same streets, even the same aroma of coffee in the alley corners, yet all with completely different meanings for Xiao Zhang and Zhou Lucy. Their names were no longer whispered vaguely, but spoken with layers of interpretation. Some praised their courage, some mocked their foolishness, and others turned their story into dinner-table jokes, as if two strangers' love were fair public entertainment. Xiao Zhang officially lost his job through a letter whose language was so cold it barely contained any emotional verbs. Ironically, he felt more human reading that dismissal letter. For the first time, his life was no longer regulated by office hours and archive shelves. But freedom came with fear, because he had never learned to live without the fence of rules. Zhou Lucy tried to comfort him by saying he could finally sleep in without violating professional ethics, but the joke only half worked, drawing a faint smile before he stared at the ceiling with an empty mind. Zhou Lucy herself was not spared from consequences. The editors who once praised her bravery now asked her to write in a safer, more neutral, less noisy tone. She refused, of course, because to her, writing without emotion was like breathing without air. As a result, she returned to being fully freelance, living off irregularly paid articles and reader comments that were sometimes sharper than an editor's critique. Yet beneath it all, there was a strange satisfaction, the satisfaction of not betraying herself. They moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, where neighbors didn't care who they were as long as they weren't noisy after 10 at night. The apartment witnessed many absurd moments, like when Xiao Zhang tried to cook by following a recipe the way he read laws, complete with precise measurements, only to produce food that tasted like an annual report. Zhou Lucy laughed while ordering delivery and wrote a note on the fridge saying that love didn't need measurements in grams. But not every day was filled with laughter. There were quiet nights when Zhou Lucy woke to find Xiao Zhang sitting on the sofa, staring at his old documents as if still searching for justification among obsolete clauses. There were also mornings when Xiao Zhang felt jealous of Zhou Lucy's world that still moved, still overflowed with ideas and words, while he felt stuck in one place. Small arguments became inevitable, about trivial things that were really disguises for larger fears. Fear of being a burden, fear of losing direction, fear that love alone might not be enough. One day, Zhou Lucy had a crazy idea, an idea that made her eyes sparkle like when she wrote her most controversial article. She wanted to write a book, not just articles, a book about the law of love, about how social laws punish feelings, about their story as living proof. Xiao Zhang initially refused fiercely, saying their lives were not public consumption, that wounds shouldn't be sold as narratives. Zhou Lucy was angry, not at the rejection itself, but because she felt Xiao Zhang still wanted to hide behind a facade of order. Their argument that night was long and heated, laced with bitter humor and tears. Yet in the middle of the anger, Xiao Zhang suddenly realized something he had long missed. He was afraid, not of the public, not of criticism, but of the possibility that their story would become real and uncontrollable. That realization made him chuckle softly, surprising Zhou Lucy, as he finally said that perhaps, just this once, he had to let life write itself. The process of writing the book became an emotional journey of its own. Zhou Lucy wrote quickly, full of emotion, while Xiao Zhang became the first reader, giving notes not as a legal expert, but as someone finally learning to feel without analyzing. There were parts that made them laugh out loud, recalling past foolishness, and parts that made them fall silent, realizing how close they had come to losing each other. When the book was finally published independently, they didn't expect much. But something unexpected happened. The book was read, shared, and discussed. Many people found themselves in its pages, finding courage or simply comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The Law of Love, once merely a metaphorical title, slowly became a symbol of emotional resistance. Xiao Zhang, once living a quiet life, began to be invited to speak, not as a legal expert, but as a human who had once been trapped between clauses and feelings. He often joked that he had finally found a profession with no clear rules, and that was precisely what made him feel alive. Zhou Lucy smiled at the change, a change she never forced, only waited for patiently. Yet like all love stories, trials never truly end. As the book's popularity grew, new pressure emerged. The public wanted more, demanded sequels, demanded happy endings, as if love must always meet audience expectations. Zhou Lucy grew tired, feeling their story being dragged back into the public courtroom. Xiao Zhang, now more perceptive, became her support, reminding her that they owed the world nothing beyond honesty to themselves. One quiet night, they sat on the apartment balcony, watching city lights flicker like silent witnesses to their journey. Xiao Zhang asked, half joking, half serious, whether if there were a new law about love, they would break it too. Zhou Lucy laughed and replied that if love were regulated too tightly, it wouldn't be love, it would be a contract. And there they were, two people once judged by the world, now living with the awareness that love needs no justification other than the courage to endure. Their story was not finished, because life always moves and changes. But one thing was certain. The law of love they wrote together was not a set of clauses, but a series of small daily choices to keep choosing each other, even when the world questioned them again. Time moved strangely after that, no longer feeling like a straight line measurable by calendars. For Xiao Zhang and Zhou Lucy, days felt like unnumbered pages, sometimes light, sometimes heavy, but always meaningful. The popularity of the Law of Love gradually faded, not disappearing, but becoming a quieter echo. They learned an important lesson. The spotlight cannot be a home. It is only a stopover, exhausting if stayed in too long. One morning, Xiao Zhang received another letter, this time not a dismissal or a speaking invitation, but an offer to teach at an alternative legal community. Not a prestigious campus, not an official institution, but a small space where young people learned law as a tool of empathy rather than mere power. He read the letter repeatedly, then laughed to himself, realizing the irony. He once lived for the law, now the law came to him with a far more human face. Zhou Lucy watched the change with emotion she hid behind jokes. She teased Xiao Zhang, saying he had finally become a lecturer without an official suit or a fierce expression. Meanwhile, Zhou Lucy herself began writing with a new rhythm, no longer chasing sensation alone, but not losing sharpness either. She wrote about ordinary people, about loves defeated by norms, about laughter born from wounds. Her pieces weren't always viral, but they were always honest, and that was enough. Yet like unwritten laws that always test, life delivered one final trial, a trial that couldn't be resolved with words. Zhou Lucy received a job offer from outside the city, a rare chance to lead an independent journalism project aligned with her values. The offer meant distance, the possibility of living apart, and a big question that couldn't be answered with empty promises. The night the decision had to be made was the quietest they had ever shared. No arguments, no dramatic tears, just naked honesty. Zhou Lucy feared losing herself if she refused. Xiao Zhang feared losing them if she accepted. For the first time, their love was tested not by the world, but by their individual dreams. Xiao Zhang finally said something that left Zhou Lucy silent for a long time. He said that love was not a prison that confined steps, and if he had to lose physical closeness to preserve healthy emotional distance, then it was a risk worth taking. Zhou Lucy cried that night not from sadness, but from finally being truly understood. They lived a long-distance relationship in their own way, video calls full of silly laughter, voice messages filled with trivial complaints, and short visits that always ended too quickly. It wasn't easy, often exhausting, but there they realized that their version of the law of love had matured. There were no possessive clauses, no restraining verses, only trust constantly renewed. Years passed unnoticed. The city that once judged them now felt distant, almost like a fading memory. One day, at a small launch event for a revised edition of The Law of Love, Xiao Zhang stood before the audience with slightly trembling hands. Zhou Lucy sat in the front row, smiling suspiciously, sensing something unusual. At the end of the event, Xiao Zhang closed his speech with a sentence that hushed the room. He said that if law governs humans, then love governs the courage to live honestly. Then, without a script, without excessive metaphors, he looked at Zhou Lucy and asked whether she would be willing to keep breaking the law of love with him, not as an escape, but as a conscious daily choice. Laughter, applause, and tears blended into one. Zhou Lucy answered with her trademark joke, saying she needed to read the terms and conditions first, before finally saying yes in a trembling voice. Not a perfect proposal like in dramas, but perfectly them. The ending of this story is not about a grand wedding or a problem-free life. It is about two people who were once judged, once fell, once feared, yet chose to keep walking together in their own way. The law of love that once felt frightening now serves only as a reminder that true love does not demand blind obedience, but the courage to keep choosing, even without guarantees. And if you ask whether Xiao Zhang and Zhou Lucy lived happily ever after, the answer is simple and honest. They did not live happily ever after. They lived as they were, with laughter, tears, conflict, and peace alternating. Yet perhaps that is where the truest happiness resides. Now the question returns to you. If one day your love collides with rules, will you submit or dare to write your own law? This story ends here, but the echo of its question will live on, as long as there are hearts brave enough to break rules for honesty.